All right, hello everyone. Welcome again to another amazing session that we're going to start. And we will now have the following keynote address, and our third wonderful speaker is Anne McCreath. I hope I said that right. So she has lived in Kenya since 1992, and she is the founder of fashion heritage brand KikoRomeo. It was set up in 1996 in Kenya, and the idea behind it was to stimulate employment and to also promote traditional craft skills. She has an MA honors from the University of Edinburgh, a diploma in fashion from KOEFIA in Rome, and more than 3 decades of experience in the fashion industry. A pioneer entrepreneur in sustainable fashion, she continues to design, but she also mentors young designers and does consulting when it comes to the fashion industry players. She is part of the Kenyan Fashion Council, and she's also an advisor to Fashion Revolution Kenya. With her work as a designer and consultant, she tries to combine excellent knowledge of different markets from Europe to Africa, and also tries to assess the needs and challenges that arise for designers and fashion brands. And with her, we would like to see what it takes to make a brand stand out. Thank you for joining us, Anne.
Thank you so very much. It's really a great pleasure to be here. I love talking about my favorite theme today, which is like, you are your brand's biggest asset. And we are told to go into the global marketplace, sell our goods, and that's what we focus on. But we sometimes forget the absolute key thing, which is ourselves. And that key thing, ourselves, is what we're bringing into the brand, which is totally unique in the world. And so over the years with my own brand, I've realized that that is perhaps something that really made us stand out from the beginning, because right from the start, I was clear about what I wanted to do. And so I didn't get so influenced by this one's doing this one's doing that. I was focused on something that was really important to me. And so I was able to now deliver a clear message to whoever was interested in my brand. Now, I've realized over these very many years, which are now 25 years, there have sometimes been times when I've maybe lost the path of the way, a bit of the way. I've started thinking, oh, maybe I should do this, or maybe I should do that. But with a moment of clarity and reflection, I have gradually tried to put everything on paper so that I have a clear roadmap for my brand. And what I wanted to do today with you is to get you to think about what is special about you, so that whatever you do with your brand is really totally unique to what anyone else is doing. And you use that self-journey to just position yourself in a way that you're fully confident and comfortable, both with who you are as a person, as well as the brand that you're putting out there. So I wanted to go over a few things that I've found helpful on this journey, and I encourage a lot of people I work with today to do. The first thing is to think very clearly about your upbringing, where you grew up, how you grew up, the influences in your environment, the people you met at school, your parents, the places you worship, those people that were figures in your life who taught you things. Now, when we look back at our early childhood and then our childhood in general, we may realize that there are some things that are not who we want to be. So there are things that we are taught that we adopt, but maybe at a certain time we start thinking, I'm not so sure I really believe that. And you have to think a little bit deeper to think, is that just something I was taught, a belief system? Is it true for me? Or is it just the environment I was in that conditioned me to think those things were important? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, because when I reflect on it, I can see how it's translated into my brand. I was born in southwest Scotland. My father was a farmer, so it was very remote, very far from fashion scene. My mother was actually South African, which was totally unusual in our part of Scotland. And you can imagine where that leads to today. And I grew up as a tomboy. I was always on the farm. I was, not just playing on the farm, I was actually working on the farm. I wanted to be a farmer, but quite early on, I was told that a girl couldn't inherit a farm. So I think that was the start of my feminist beginnings, because it didn't feel very fair to me. But also in relation to fashion, a lot of my family members loved doing things with arts and crafts. So my grandmother used to do wonderful embroidery. My aunt did embroidery. She also did knitting. She also taught home science. And my mother stitched clothes. And so from a very early age, I learned how to sew. I also, of course, before that, learned how to sew for my dolls. But fashion and crafting was central to who I was. Another thing of relation to what I do now as a brand is clothing. Like, we treasured clothing. I was the eldest, so I was lucky I got the new clothes. And then the eldest boy got the newest boys' clothes. But after that, we handed our clothes down. So we were always looking at clothes as something durable, something that someone else would also wear. And repairing was just something that was done, and it was order of the day. Ironically now, of course, it's now come very much back into focus with sustainability. And so those things, when I look at our brand and how I choose fabrics and how I design, I look for things that are going to last in time, not things that are going to be wonderful today and gone tomorrow. I like our designs to be relevant and to stay there and to make people look good, but in a way that they can treasure them. I also look at the situation where the location I grew up was near Northern Ireland. And at the time there was a lot of fighting there. So a lot of people moved from Ireland into our part of Scotland. I relate that to how I've used fashion with refugees and also with peace building, because when you grow up next to that, you're conscious of what it means to have to leave everything. So even if it's not you as an individual, you're aware of it. And then another thing that I can look on is, even being the eldest child, and then in this kind of environment, I was always looking out for others and helping people. And again, that's something that I can say with our brand is another thing that gets translated into our brand. So I'm telling you these stories, and of course I forgot the one about my mother being South African. So although I was growing up in Scotland on a farm, we had things from Africa in the house. And my mother loved bright colors and geometric designs and was very good at art. So that also influenced me and also made me interested in Africa and knowing more about it. And of course, not always agreeing on the politics and things like that, and even going on to study African history because of it. But that now, of course, brought me to Africa. And when I decided on setting up my fashion brand for a number of reasons, this whole thing of, I wanted to work with local materials. I wanted to be inspired by the environment that I was in. And so I didn't even use my own name as my brand name. I chose another name, KikoRomeo, which means Adam's apple in Kiswahili. So that situated me as a designer with a Swahili name. So it was obviously, a disconnect perhaps from what I looked like, but it was the kind of designs that we were putting out and have continued to do so, have very much been close to this thing of African art and appreciation of that. And then the textures and the handcrafting have just remained very much a unique part of our brand. And the sustainability aspect, where we're using natural fibers, everything, we're conscious of how we do the processes, how we involve the artisans, the trainings we give them, and how much we pay them. All of these things are an integral part of positioning us as a sustainable brand, but also tapping into where I've come from. So that when I speak on behalf of the brand, it's very comfortable with who I am. I'm not having to pretend to be somebody else because of, you know, how I want my brand to be. So as we go into how you can create your brand DNA, as we're going to call it, DNA is that essential thing in you. It's an integral part of you that can't be moved. It's just something inbuilt. So when we talk about brand DNA, we create that for our brand. We say these are the things that are just such an integral part of our brand that it doesn't matter what opportunities arise and what influences are there. We have something that we know is completely unique to our brand. And so the exercise that I have suggested to you, and after this talk, there will be documentation around that, is how you yourself look back and think about these things, think about those values, think about what you want to bring into your brand, and think about those skills that add value in your brand. And all of those go into this wonderful document called your brand DNA. It's a fancy name for something that, when you think about it, should be very natural with who you are. If you start borrowing things from this one or that one or that one, you get into a state of confusion because you're no longer on your path, you're trying to be on other people's path. And that's when the confusion sets in. And then when you go out into the global market and present yourself, it's not clear what you're standing for. Or if someone thinks it's clear the first season, they see you the second season and there's a disconnect, they don't understand you. So that's why this whole process is so important. So when you've looked at your core values and what you want your brand to stand for, you've married that with the kind of skills you have and how you're going to create within those influences. You now have a blueprint for something that can be shared with people. It can be shared with external people, with consumers, with buyers. It can be shared with the media, but it can also be shared internally with your staff. To what extent are your staff aware of where you come from and what your vision is? We're very good at going into a workshop and saying, can you make this, can you make that, and so on. But we're not always good at telling the full story to the people around us who are then responsible also for sharing that and being part of that and buying into it so that they're contributing to the growth within this brand DNA rather than distracting from it. And so as I look forward at how we then use this brand DNA, the question is how we apply it in all aspects of our business. So we don't just look at the outward storytelling, which is critically important, but we also look at the processes in our business. If we're a zero waste company, or we call ourselves a zero waste company, we can't afford to now be not using our waste materials. Our waste materials need to be thought through so that they're all being used to maximum effect. That's what zero waste means. It can't be that we've said we're zero waste and then behind the scenes we're not behaving like that, because the two have to be joined together. If we say that we're letting our workers have good working conditions, and for example, we're maybe saying that they're having a lovely walk to work in like a lush green neighborhood with lots of trees, we on the ground may be conscious that actually that is not necessarily true, or maybe that's actually a security risk for those staff. So we have to be true to who we really are and the context we're in, and not just telling a story because we're going to know it's going to be on a checklist and people are saying, you know, well done you, but it's not true. We have to be authentic. We have to apply this brand DNA to all of our processes gradually. We can't do everything overnight. It takes time and sometimes it takes resources. But the key thing is we have to be true to ourselves, because when we're being true and telling a true story, we don't have to constantly be catching up to work out like, oh, did I say this here? Did I say that there? We can actually be relaxed with our brand and what our messaging is. Then we have another wonderful use for this brand DNA. As you get out there, you're going to get an email inbox that keeps having opportunities in it. So you'll get an email from here, would you like to join this fashion week? An email from there, another fashion event. Oh, I've got a showroom. It's only €200 a month or €500 a month. And you suddenly see your inbox is filling up with all of these different opportunities. So what I say to that is wonderful. You've got your name out. Fantastic. That's great. You're doing something really right. But now, is that really an opportunity for you and your brand, or is it a great opportunity for someone else? Is that opportunity really something that's going to help you grow on this path that you've defined for your brand? Or is it something that's going to deviate you and take you elsewhere? Now, trust me, I've done this often and I've been off the path often. So the important thing when you go off the path is knowing, like, okay, I've made a bit of mistake here. Let me get back on the path. Because we're all human, we all get tempted. We also get very excited by these international opportunities. But some of them, honestly, are a total waste of time. They're a waste of your time. They're a waste of your resources. And those people are there to sell. Even if, you know, somebody's giving them €2,000 and you're giving them €200, it's all part of their sales package. And they need to make the numbers. But is it really adding value to you and your brand? So this is where your wonderful brand DNA, you can be comparing notes. And in fact, if you have an assistant and you've defined this, they can even be filtering these things. So they can be telling you, we've seen this, it looks exactly in sync with what we're doing. So we think you should have a look at it. So make sure that you use it. Then I'm going to add the last thing for me, which is you have to live your brand DNA. Fashion is fun. And in the year of COVID, we realized that, crikey, we need more fashion. Like, we need to have fun with it. We need to be able to project ourselves in a way that we're in harmony. And at the same time, we're attracting people who want to be part of what we find valuable. Because if we share our values and people like them, that is when they now want to buy our products and they're happy to pay whatever price. And when I say whatever price, if someone values what you're doing, pricing is a secondary thing. If they don't have the money there and then, they'll save up the money and they'll buy when they can. But they have to feel that you've got a connection. We're very far away from each other. Sometimes that connection can seem vague. But by being present online, doing things that are attractive to you, that are then also attractive to your clients and your future clients, messages share, your brand gets out there, even professional buyers also see you, and you attract the right people that allow you to grow in a way that you want to grow. So I think those are my final remarks. I just want to wish you all the very best of luck. I want you to understand you have no direct competitors. Nobody who's watching this is a direct competitor. You're all a unique combination of your own experiences and values. So you look at that and you stick with that and you understand that then you can sell to the same client. A customer doesn't wear the same thing 24/7. It's only if they're being paid to do so or they're making it. So that means you can find synergy with other designers, combine resources, and do things together. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for giving us all these insights. I mean, yeah, it's a major lesson. So we do have quite a few questions for you. We'll start with the participants. And of course, we have one from Anatoly BG, who is wondering when a designer wants to be private or is shy about disclosing their personal information, is there a way where they can successfully sell their products and their ideas without per se selling the person or the team behind it? So yeah.
I would say yes, because we all have different personalities. And so how we express ourselves can be done differently. I think the exercise of looking at yourself and understanding those values are still very important, because that determines the path.
Exactly.
But you don't have, you choose what you bring into your brand. So you have your private self and you have your public self, and you manage them as two different things. Now, your public self doesn't have to be super extrovert, vocal, and so on. You do it in your own way, in your own style. Maybe you do it through written word. Maybe you do it through imagery, but you don't have to. That's, again, the unique difference that you have. You're a quieter way of doing things. That also has a clientele it attracts. So yes, you can be you. Just decide what of you you're bringing into your brand and talking about, and what you're not talking about.
Okay, so another question that I have for you here is, when it comes to remaining authentic to yourself per se, and then there's the advent of new trends or things that are out of the ordinary per se. So when you think that, Adele, how do you find the balance between being trendy enough, but also remaining true to your authenticity?
I think it depends on where the trend information is coming from and how well you've researched trends. Because trend forecasting always has very many different themes. It's not one theme for one season. There's different themes for different seasons, for different types of garments. So sportswear will have its themes, casual wear will have its, occasion wear will have its, and so on. So you find what you like within one of those areas. And it goes with color palettes and so on. Having said that, the color palette and the trend forecasting is quite a lot more relevant for international markets, where I would say they're critical. But for me, how I use them is I probably already have an idea of what I want to be talking about, because my collections speak about things. But then I'll always have a quick look at what the trends are for the next season, or the season I'm designing for. So I've got a bit of a reference point of, this is the direction the market's going in. But at the same time, understanding that markets have got lots of differences. So I can slot into this bit or that bit or the other bit. And for me, having a sustainable brand, I also understand that within the sustainability trend, and it's more, I don't know, that's the wrong way of describing it, but within that area of fashion, there is quite a wide understanding also of difference, an appreciation of difference. So, and I would recommend actually, particularly the designers in this bootcamp, to really clearly associate with sustainability, because it's a kind of practice that they're all doing anyway. And it has a great niche market which will understand those differences.
Okay. So again, still sticking to the trends, I have a question wondering where do I research trends?
I didn't catch that. Where do I want?
Where to research trends, because you said that you have
very good question.
Yeah.
Good question. So we have consumer trends, which is what the media often talks about in our local environment, which is what the customer's wearing now. Now, if you're in fashion forecasting for export, you're not looking at what the person is wearing now, you're looking at what they're going to be wearing next. In your local business, that might be different. You might say, oh, they're all buying this, so let me make a variation on that sits in my brand. It's different. For international, you're looking at what they'll be wearing in a future season. So to research that personally, I often go on, I mean, one of the main ones that's known globally is WGSN, but subscriptions are astronomically expensive for us in small business in Africa. It's really not viable. However, they sometimes do newsletters, and they also put a little bit on their social media. So WGSN is a good one. There's also the thing of looking at textile fairs like Premier Vision, that predict what the textiles will be for the next season. And the textile fairs are usually 6 months before the designers present their collections. So I find textile fair predictions very useful.
Okay. Now, bringing it again to African and in particular Ethiopian fashion, do you think that the textile tradition is uprising? And also a continuation to that question would be, do you think that it works better within Africa or in Europe?
The first word that you used, I didn't get. You said, do you think it's prizing?
No, it's actually uprising. I mean, if it's on a growth.
Okay, so I'm not located in Ethiopia, but I've visited it often and I've worked there. And I've visited some of the weavers and the factories there. So I think it's a huge wealth. And definitely when you export globally, the Ethiopian textile is very unique. It's about how you use it. And if you think of the world as being huge, which it is, and if you think of even one city, like if you think of Berlin or another part of Germany, or you think of Paris, the number of different shops that stock designer items, and even within those, a number of different shops that may stock African designer items. Certainly using Ethiopian cloth makes you stand out from other designers in the world, because other designers in the world can't get that cloth. It's very difficult to get. So it already makes you unique. Now, within your local markets, I'm very sure that you struggle with it sometimes because you feel everyone's using the same thing. But you can also look at different ways of treating the fabric that then gives it a different identity. So for me, it's definitely a huge wealth, asset, richness. But I do understand that also there may sometimes be frustrations around that because you feel your creativity is a bit limited. However, look at your supply chain. Ethiopian cloth is sustainable. You can get it again. Yes. And if you're doing export, you also want repeat orders. And so if you're using cloth that's homegrown, it's much easier to get again. And I think also there's a project by Sita and Bardar, which has now developed quite a lot of different types of weave, which allow a more variation for Ethiopian designers buying local.
Okay, thank you for that. And one last question that I have for you, until others trickle down, we'll see about that. But so when you design, do you already have a market or a particular person, buyer in mind when you design, or do you rather focus on the idea and just know that it will sell itself?
I think because we've grown over time and we've been in the business for a long time, we do have a clear idea of who likes our clothes. And we've defined that even within our, as we've worked our brand DNA, we've also gone on to the kind of core people who are going to like the brand. So we know they're artistic, we know they appreciate natural fibers. And interestingly, the age demographic is quite ample. So it could be maybe late 20s up to 60s, 70s plus. There's a very wide age range. But the thing of appreciation of art is very much there. So when we design our collection, we stay true to what we've always been about, which is the handcrafting, the textures, the colors, the artisan work, which are very much part of us. Now, when you're starting up and you're still finding yourself, and you may not know your consumer, I still think if you've done your brand DNA well, you're still looking at a type of consumer. You've still got an idea in your head of, what kind of size is the person going to be? What kind of age group? What kind of skin? That also affects the colors that we use in our collections. What type of lifestyle do they have? Now, this is very important because with COVID, a lot of people have changed what they're wearing. They wear comfortable things that are easy to dress up on Zoom. but they're not wearing lots of occasion wear, which designers traditionally have done a lot of. So that means that maybe you've been used to doing an occasion wear collection and now you have to do that shift. So yes, I think it's always good to have an idea in mind, but then you can be very creative within that.
Within that scope.
Yeah.
Again, one last question. I will say the last until I get more, but yeah. So when it comes to Ethiopian styles and fabric, again, what do you think is their greatest asset? Because again, you said that they're pretty authentic, but then if you could elaborate a bit more.
So for sake of comparison, I'm in Kenya, and in Kenya, they don't weave fine cotton by hand. So the kind of weight of hand-woven cotton that I can buy is medium to heavyweight. And sometimes it's mixed with wool and so on, but the cotton would be like that. Whereas in Ethiopia, you have very fine cotton being woven by hand. It naturally lends itself to resort wear because of its weight. And it's definitely something that, you know, designers like me look at and think, I would like to work with that fabric, because we can't get that weight. Yeah. And then the textures within the cloth, how it's woven, and then the decorations. But then I should say the whole process. I think I talked about applying the brand DNA in the process and integrating it in the story and so on. So the whole story of how things are woven, the uniqueness of the looms, the traditional looms that are used to weave these things. Sometimes they may not be as efficient as a modern loom, and there probably has to be some technological breakthroughs in some places to develop new textiles. But for me visiting, that was totally unique. I was fascinated and I posted it on the net and everybody was asking me questions about it. It is unique. It's something, it's a heritage, it's a craft skill, it's something that's so rich in story. And then this love that goes into making each and every individual item. It drives you crazy as a designer because sometimes you can't get the same thing again. So work it into your story that you're again talking about the uniqueness of the actual weaver's DNA, that this weaver's influences make them do this or that. They're not used to standardization. They don't understand the point of standardization because everybody wants something different. So that is the background you're coming from. So when you package that for export, remember to tell that story so that it becomes a positive, not a negative. Any more questions? I think we're maybe done with the questions.
No, I think we have a technical problem. This is Beatrice. I'm from The Good Business. But I have another question here. Are there many fabric designers in Ethiopia, or is it mainly traditional patterns?
Interesting, because again, I feel like I'm speaking as an outsider to Ethiopia. However, from what I've seen and what I've heard. So there was a young designer on my class, Howie, who had invented a fabulous weave with QR codes. Now, obviously, that is a new textile design. The labor and the struggling with the weaver that she went through to be able to achieve that, I know was considerable. However, she did it. And I think this is a huge area of opportunity for any of the fashion designers, maybe to learn a little bit more about textile design, because sometimes when we think of textile design in Africa, we're thinking about print. But actually, textile design is also about the weave and how you might change that weave to be unique and give a different texture. So I think there's huge opportunity to develop that part of the Ethiopian fashion industry. Great idea. I would support it 100%. And I just wish it could also be exported, or, designers like me come in from outside, even manufacture in Ethiopia a finished item using Ethiopian cloth. But for the designers, definitely see what you can do to develop a whole cloth or even a decorative part that you can combine with another cloth. Any more questions, Beatrice?
Yes, I think I'm just waiting to see if there are some from the participants, but otherwise I would say we have answered all the questions, and we thank you very, very much. It was very interesting, your perspective on the brand DNA, and we learned, I think, a lot. And to all the participants, we see you later in the next webinar, which will talk about financing, which is also very, very interesting if you are trying to build a brand. So thank you all and see you later.
Thank you, Anne. See you later.
Thank you.
All right.